Hello there, my name's Brandon and I make pictures out of tiny squares. And in this video I'm going to be redrawing a few classic NES sprites at double size. So to get started I'm going to resize this sprite of Link up to 200% scale and then just start drawing on top of that to see what kind of edits that we can make to it. Now I'm referring to this as double size, and what I mean by that is that I've obviously doubled both the width and the height of the sprite. But when you start to think about it, when you do this, every pixel that used to be just a single pixel in the original sprite now becomes a square cluster of 4 pixels in the resized version. So in a sense, you could almost think of this resize here as gaining a 4 times efficiency, at least in terms of the overall pixel density. I think I'll still refer to it just as doubling the size though, since that kind of seems the most intuitive for the way that it was handled. But it's interesting that even the smallest integer upscaling like this feels like it could end up being pretty dramatic. And that's kind of why I wanted to explore this exercise in the first place. So what I've got here is a selection of 5 NES sprites, and I've sized them up to 200%. And before getting too crazy with significant redesigns or anything, I'm just going to do a simple first pass over them and use the new higher resolution here to kind of smooth out the existing angles and curves. Mainly, I just want to see what it looks like to make them bigger, but still maintain their original kind of underlying architecture and style. And this was pretty straightforward for sprites like Link and Mario that just use a few colors. And what really surprised me were the sprites like Mega Man and Darkwing Duck there, which actually use black line work throughout them. So when you double the scale, it kind of becomes necessary to thin out that black line work down to a single pixel width, because that's how line work tends to go. Which means you can either shave it off from the outer layer, or you can expand the color inside to kind of fill that extra space. I think I probably ended up doing a mix of both of those approaches, just because it was also a little disorienting when working through the upscaled versions like this. Like, I don't know if you can tell just in the time lapse, but for a little while it really feels like you're caught between two different resolutions. But slowly you start to feel that there's this higher resolution image that starts to form out of that chaos. In the end though, the thing that was cool about essentially preparing a high resolution trace like this was that it kind of makes you appreciate the logic that went into those original small scale sprites. Because once you have that freedom of the high resolution, it sort of reveals the complex shapes that those original ones had to find creative solutions for just to approximate something similar within like the tighter restrictions that they had. Now that we've got the simple upscaled versions, what I want to do is go back through all of these and actually just have a bit of fun making some stronger edits to the sprite work, and try to use that higher resolution to add some more detail to the characters. I'm just going to go off book for these and just try to make something aesthetically pleasing, but I still want to stay true to the general presentation of the sprites, just as far as like the number of colors and the way that the colors are used. But for instance with Link here, it seemed like it'd be nice to bring in more visibility for his hat, and then kind of work things like the shield and even the hairstyle to be just a bit more reminiscent of the illustrated character art here. But in the end, I guess, it's still got that flavor and that simplicity just like the original sprite, just now it's larger and has a couple more character features. With Mario, I think the biggest thing for me was to bring in more of the iconic shape of his hat and give it just a bit more volume. What's kind of funny about this Mario sprite actually is that, I chose to remake the small Mario, just so it'd be like the most dramatic change. But there is of course the big Mario from When You Eat a Mushroom, and that one's actually double the height of the small one already. So we're kind of working on the same scale here as that one, for the height at least. But the interesting thing about seeing the small Mario resized and reworked like this is that there is sort of a difference in proportion, like just the way that his head sort of looks a lot larger on that body. And I used that space to fill in just some more friendly features into his face and kind of give him like the more recognizable shape to his mustache as well. Now, once again with Mega Man, I spent a little while being stumped as far as what the style logic should be. I think what was making this uncertain for me just has to do with the way that the line work is used in this sprite. So in the original version, there's black line work around the sprite, and it is also used on like the helmet deco and for the eyes and the mouth. But there's no line work to really separate the division of his torso and waist, or a line between like his boots and his legs, that sort of thing. And the reason for this is obviously because it'd be a lot to throw that much line work into such a small space like this. However, once you double the size, it starts to look a little weird to not have these line work divisions, especially when there's so much room that could accommodate them. So I spent some time here waffling back and forth about adding line work divisions within the sprite. I also went pretty hard on redesigning the face as well, because again, it felt like with there being so much more room, it really could use a lot more attention and detail. And I think overall, the added line work just kind of solidified this cartoony appearance that feels in line with some of the original styling. Alright, and of course, Darkwing Duck was the other sprite of this set that also has line work. Although in this case, he's already got a lot of line work running throughout the design. Now, this sprite is actually one of my favorites from the NES, which is why I included it in this set. And I just think it does a nice job like capturing that Disney Saturday morning cartoon look. And it's pretty ambitious to translate all that layering and the costume design into a small sprite like this. And now that there's a lot more room in the resized version, we can sort of give a bit more clarity to the way that these pieces of clothing are sitting together. Another feature that I like about this sprite is just the way that it uses the orange both as a solid color, but also as a shade tone for some of the white areas. So in the resized version, it felt like it'd be appropriate to start to use the purple as a shade tone as well. So it kind of ends up being a little bit more detailed, I guess, as far as becoming like manual anti-aliasing that kind of softens these darker areas. I also use the extra resolution here just to give a bit more clarity in the silhouette too. So you can see that we can find a bit more negative space between like the hat and the beak and things like that. And overall should just give a bit more readability. And finally, we've got the Samus sprites, and in general, this one's got a pretty simple look, similar to the sprites of like Link and Mario that just use 3 colors. But it does this thing where it's using the red and the green as sort of like extra detailing here and there. So I sort of carried that idea a little further. I didn't really want to go crazy with it because it's the kind of thing that really could get quite visually noisy. But I was using that reference art just to find a few more places for those sorts of details. The other thing this sprite does is that you can see there's a few sort of transparent gaps where the gray background is showing through. And so normally Metroid, this would be showing through to a black background. And then in that way, those gaps would be filled in with black and become a little bit more useful almost as line work within the sprite. So for the final thing here, I'll just put it on a dark background and we can kind of see that full effect in action. In my version, aside from the upsizing, the biggest difference is probably just that slight touch of added details and then kind of the shaping to the arm cannon. And finally, let's just bring them all together and just prepare yourself because I'm going to flip back and forth between the original sprites and the new ones. This was kind of my favorite way to just sort of fully appreciate the differences. So yeah, I don't know. That's kind of it. This is one of those things that was really just about the experimentation of seeing what happens when resizing a sprite like this. And I think it was actually a fun way to sort of show the way that certain design logic can both stay the same, but also maybe offer new opportunities when you do work at different sizes. So I just hope you had fun seeing this come together. And thank you for watching, and take care and keep it square.